Fans believed the tension between A$AP Rocky and Drake was just another exaggerated hip-hop rumor, the kind that lives online, gets dissected on forums, then quietly fades away. But then Rocky said one sentence, not a diss track, not a tweet, not even a rant, just a calm, almost casual line that hit harder than any lyric ever could. And suddenly, what fans thought they understood didn't feel so clear anymore. Because this wasn't about clout, it wasn't about charts, and it definitely wasn't just about music. This story runs deeper, through pride, history, and one woman whose name keeps surfacing every time these two artists are mentioned in the same sentence. And once you connect all the dots, the situation looks very different. But to understand how things reached this point, you have to go back to a time when none of this existed. There was a time when Rocky and Drake weren't rivals, rumors, or opposing fan bases. They were collaborators. They shared stages, studios, and moments that made it clear, at least publicly, that respect was there. Their early interactions felt effortless, like two artists moving through the same era without stepping on each other's toes. At the time, it made sense. Drake was dominating charts, redefining what mainstream rap could look like. Rocky was shaping culture, fashion, and sound in his own lane. Different styles, different energies, same level. And for a while, that balance held. But hip-hop has always been competitive, even when it looks friendly on the surface. Quiet comparisons happen behind closed doors. Whose album hit harder? Who moved culture more? Who mattered in the room? Nothing explosive, just tension that never needed words. Until it did. Because everything shifted when one name started appearing in both of their stories. For nearly a decade, Drake's connection to Rihanna wasn't subtle. It was public, emotional, sometimes awkwardly so. He talked about her in interviews, referenced her in music, even stood on one of the biggest award show stages in the world and poured his feelings out in front of millions. Fans watched it unfold in real time, the on-again, off-again energy, the unspoken hope that it would eventually turn into something permanent. But that moment never came. Instead, Rihanna moved differently, quietly, privately, and when she re-emerged romantically, it wasn't with Drake, it was with Rocky. No spectacle, no announcement, just consistency. And while Rocky never spoke loudly about it, the message was clear. He wasn't chasing attention, he was building a life. For fans, that alone changed the dynamic, because suddenly this wasn't just two rappers with history, it was one man watching a chapter close and another living inside it. And once that reality settled in, people started listening more closely, especially to the music. And that's when fans noticed something in Rocky's lyrics that felt a little too specific to ignore. Hip-hop fans are trained to listen between the lines. Not every message is meant to be obvious. In fact, the most effective ones rarely are. They live in phrasing, timing, and confidence. And when Rocky dropped "Stole Ya Flow," listeners immediately leaned in. The bars didn't sound angry. They didn't sound desperate. They sounded settled. That's what caught attention. There was no name mentioned, no direct call-out, just a statement of position, one that placed Rocky firmly ahead, unbothered, and already moved on. Fans began connecting dots almost instantly. The references, the tone, the confidence of someone who doesn't need to explain himself. In hip-hop culture, that matters, because when someone truly feels threatened, they over-explain, they swing loudly, they escalate. Rocky didn't do that. He delivered his lines like a man stating facts, not trying to prove anything. And for many listeners, that was louder than any diss track. Still, speculation stayed speculation, until Rocky finally spoke. When Rocky sat down for the Apple Music interview, fans expected a dodge, a joke, a redirect, something vague enough to keep headlines moving without revealing anything real. Instead, he leaned in. He acknowledged the talk, the rumors, the endless online debates. Then he did something unexpected. He stripped the situation of drama. He compared rap beef to wrestling, performance, exaggeration, strategy. That alone calmed some fans. But then came the line no one saw coming. He said it wasn't real smoke. And immediately after that, he admitted he just doesn't mess with Drake. No raised voice, no insult stacked on top of it, just a flat, honest statement. And that honesty hit harder than aggression ever could. Because saying you don't hate someone is one thing. Saying you simply don't care enough to engage with them anymore, that lands differently. The internet froze on that sentence, not because it was loud, but because it was cold. Rocky didn't stop at distance. He framed the situation as something beneath him. He talked about age, growth, moving forward, about how at a certain point, continuing to dwell on old situations, especially over relationships, feels small. And that framing mattered. Because he wasn't attacking Drake directly, he was implying something else entirely. That this wasn't a rivalry anymore. It was a difference in mindset. One person building a future, another still circling the past. Rocky emphasized that there was enough money, attention, and success for everyone. No shortage, no reason for lingering tension, which made fans ask a brutal question. If it's really that small to him, why does it still seem so heavy on the other side? That's when the conversation shifted again, because suddenly the silence from Drake felt louder than anything Rocky had said. The moment Rocky downplayed the tension, another narrative took off. Some fans believe this whole situation is bigger than personal history. Rumors suggest timing played a role, that subtle comments, carefully chosen words, and strategic silence could all connect to music cycles and public attention. That idea didn't come out of nowhere. Hip-hop has a long history of indirect moves that look accidental on the surface, but feel intentional once you zoom out. Releases line up, interviews drop at specific moments, conversations reignite just as interest needs fuel. Rocky himself dismissed that idea, comparing rap drama to staged wrestling, flashy, exaggerated, and often not what it seems. But fans weren't fully satisfied. Because even when artists deny strategy, history says perception still matters. So the debate split. One side believes Rocky was simply being honest, no rollout, no motive, just truth. The other side thinks the calm delivery was the smartest move of all, not aggressive enough to escalate, not quiet enough to disappear, just enough to control the narrative. And then there's Drake, still silent. Drake is not known for staying silent. When challenged, he usually responds, sometimes immediately, sometimes with precision later. Lyrics, subtle captions, carefully timed releases. He's mastered the art of response, which is exactly why his silence here feels intentional. Some fans believe he's choosing restraint, that responding would only validate a situation Rocky already framed as petty. Others think silence is damage control, avoiding a conversation that shifts sympathy away from him. And then there's the most uncomfortable theory of all, that there's nothing left to say. Because responding would mean acknowledging a loss, not musically, but personally, a chapter that closed without his consent. None of this is confirmed, none of it is fact, but the absence of a response creates space, and fans fill that space quickly. Every day Drake stays quiet, the narrative settles deeper. At its core, this isn't about bars, charts, or even rivalry. It's about control, the power to speak and the power to walk away. Rocky didn't assert dominance through aggression, he did it through indifference, through positioning himself as someone already past the moment everyone else is still analyzing. And in hip-hop culture, that's rare, because most conflicts thrive on escalation. This one survived on restraint. One artist spoke just enough to end speculation, the other chose silence, letting fans interpret meaning. Neither approach is wrong, but together they created a dynamic that feels unresolved, and that's exactly why people can't stop talking about it. This story isn't about who dissed who, it's about who moved on first. Rocky framed the situation as finished, Drake's silence keeps it open, and in that space, between words and quiet, fans continue to debate what really happened, and whether it ever mattered at all. Because sometimes the loudest moment in a feud isn't a lyric, it's the decision not to respond. And that choice might say more than any song ever could.